Hi, welcome to the Jessica Rector Show. I am your host, Jessica Rector. When I first read about the story of today's guest, it hit close to home. It brought back my personal pain and heartache. And it also brought this sadness of idea of anyone else experiencing what I had felt not that long ago. Laura Stack's son, Johnny, was only 19 years old when he died by suicide. Compelled by Johnny's experience, Laura started the nonprofit Johnny's Ambassadors and is now on a mission to educate others on the damaging effects of dabbing high THC. Please help me welcome Laura Stack.
Thank
Yay!
you, Jessica.
Yeah,
Thanks
my
for having
pleasure.
me.
I'm so excited that you are here and sharing more about Johnny and Johnny's Ambassadors with everyone. So tell us a little bit about your 19-year-old son, Johnny.
Well, Johnny was, of course, a wonderful young man, and every parent would say that about their son, but he truly was wonderful. He was so smart. He got a perfect math score on the SAT, an 800 out of 800. He truly was a genius in math and had scholarships to go to colleges. He was funny, loving, very handsome. If you go to his the website, you'll be able to see his photos and tribute videos. So he was truly a talented, wonderful young man, and we really had great hopes for him and his future. He had dreams, he had goals.
Yeah.
We were a normal suburban family, and we did normal suburban things. He loved people, he volunteered, was a Christian. We spent a lot of time in our church. So, just a normal life and a wonderful young man.
So what happened to kind of get him on the path, unfortunately, of dying by suicide?
Well, we live in Colorado, which was, as you know, the first state to legalize recreational marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
He was 14 years old at the time. And I want to be very clear that I don't have a problem at all with medical marijuana. I know several people who are helped by it in terms of pain and seizures in children given in moderate doses. It can help with a lot of disorders. I also don't judge people who choose to do marijuana legally. If you're 21 years old and it's legal and you want to do it, it's like, hey, it's your life, it's your brain, do what you want. And the brain of an adolescent is still forming into their 20s, 26, they say, for young men. So because this was available legally, the drug dealers showed up and the middle schools and the high schools, and by 15, 16 years old, Johnny was experimenting and dabbing marijuana. And I use the word dabbing purposefully, and we can talk about that. But he unfortunately got into this drug, and by the time he was 19, it had caused permanent schizophrenia, and he sadly had a delusional incident, and he thought the mob was after him, that everyone knew about him, that his university was an FBI base, and he jumped off a 6-story building on November 20th of 2019. So it's been 5 months now.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
So I have heard many times people saying, but marijuana is no big deal. It's not addictive. And so tell us a little bit about really the difference between marijuana that's not addictive or if there is even a such thing as marijuana that's not addictive, in your opinion, and this dabbing, as you said, because you use that very intentionally. What is that? What does that look like? And what do we need to be more aware of pertaining to that?
Yeah, well, when I was a kid, I smoked marijuana, and so I'm 50. I don't know how old the people are who are watching this, but if you're like me, you might be thinking, what's the big deal? I smoked marijuana, I'm fine. So when we were doing marijuana in the 70s and 80s, probably most of the people watching this, it was a plant, right? It was grass. We would roll it up, and we would smoke a joint. And there's a psychoactive ingredient in marijuana which makes you high. So the psychoactive ingredient, THC, tetrahydrocannabidiol, is about 2 to 5% when we smoked it in the 70s and the 80s. Today, what they do is it's no longer a plant. It's done in a lab. It is extracted by a chemist. So butane or propane is run through the marijuana and it extracts the raw THC out of the plant. And now it's mixed with a bunch of chemicals and things that are very bad for you, poisonous actually. And it's made into, it looks like beeswax, Jessica. It's sometimes called wax or shatter or dab or butter. There's all sorts of different chemical formulations of it, but it basically is no longer a plant, and you have to burn it, and it's inhaled through a rig. You can Google that and see a picture of it. Right. Or, a dabbing pen, which is different from a Juul. It has to have a vaporizing, very powerful heating device. So basically vapors are dabbed. So it is night and day. The THC now percentage of wax is 90 to 100%, 80, 90, 100.
Difference. Ah!
Pure. So you can be high all day from a hit, from a dab of this wax.
Oh my gosh.
Very different.
Yes.
It's proven that one hit of raw THC can cause psychotic episodes. Now, generally they go away.
Yeah.
And if you do it long enough, frequently enough, in a high potency format, such as dabbing, then eventually the psychotic episodes don't stop, such that even when you withdraw the THC and you're no longer doing it, the psychosis remains. And that is what happened with Johnny. He was actually drug-free. His toxicology showed no THC in his system. When he died, no drugs. Wow. He unfortunately developed that permanent schizophrenia as a result of smoking or dabbing.
So do you know that kids who are doing this, do you think that they're aware of these long-term effects that it has? That, I mean, they may be aware that, oh, I can do one hit and it lasts all day, and that may be exciting for them that they don't have to keep doing it. But are kids or parents even aware that these long-term effects exist?
Well, sadly, I think parents are our own worst enemies because we don't even know what it is. And so we almost have a blasé attitude about it to our own children. You know, oh, I did it. It's no big deal. And sometimes children are dabbing right under their parents' noses and their parents don't even know what it is. They're like, oh, that's a Juul. Well, they don't even know what a Juul is. Well, a Juul is nicotine. But a dab pen can actually look similar to a Juul, and so they can be dabbing and not even know it. So I had done a Facebook post about a month ago saying, do you know what dabbing is? And it got 20,000 shares, and it was mostly by, guess who? Parents saying, I had no idea about any of this. So I think that because there is such it's natural, it's a plant, it's healthy, it's no big deal. That kind of attitude out there, that children actually are not educated about it. They don't even really know how toxic what they're smoking is and what it does to their brains. And there is so much great research out there about the impacts of THC on the developing adolescent mind. And you know, it's not even, by the way, adolescents. I have a girlfriend who's 51 who's going to be in the book I'm writing called A Parent's Worst Nightmare. But she did 2 hits off a girlfriend's dab pen and was hospitalized in a mental hospital for 3 weeks with massive hallucinations and delusion. And so I think that it's kind of like when we were in school, when they would bring in the two lungs. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
This is the lung of a healthy person.
And this is one of someone smoking.
This is the smoker, right? And it was all black and tarry, and you could see. And so now we're able to start seeing MRI images.
Wow.
You can show kids, here's the brain of a healthy 16-year-old. Here's the brain of a 16-year-old on THC.
Oh, wow.
And it changes the neural pathways. It changes intelligence, concentration, IQ points go down permanently on this stuff. It's literally toxic. And it changes the gateways, the neural calcium channels in the brain, and it causes permanent damage. So no, I don't think children understand, because this type of education just isn't provided either by the pro-pot, industry out there, parents, school. They're not bringing two brains to school like
But how powerful would that be to have to show that?
But we do have MRIs, and that's what part of what we plan to do with our curriculum with Johnny's Ambassadors is bring it to schools and have counselors show videos of people who are 20 years old who had psychotic episodes or suicidal ideation, who survived, saying, this is real. Look at what happened to me. Don't do this. And then show, actual MRI images so that they can see the difference. And so that's what we're hoping to do with our education.
And I think you mentioned one of the key components that maybe I don't want to gloss over, is that Johnny started 14. So like young kids. So if my son is only 7, but I can't even imagine a 14-year-old starting on drugs or pot or any of that, because when I was that age, that was kind of unheard of.
Even the marijuana today, I always say, what kind of marijuana are we talking about? Because, we want to make sure we're having the same conversation when you go to a drugstore, because when you buy marijuana, you can still get the plant. It's sometimes called flower, or you can get it in edibles. They make candy, so you have to look at the THC content on the label of whatever you're talking about, versus if they're selling dab or wax, it's going to have a much higher concentration. So the kids, I use that term, by the time you're 12, 13, 14, it's in the middle schools. It is scary, and they can get it. And what we need to do is teach our children when they're young, I'm talking like 10, they need to understand, and this has to be led by the parent, what this is. Because what happens, Jessica, is they're going to be at a party, and that friend is going to show up with this stuff. And they have to be able to know at that time what's what. Because they need to be able to go, I'm not going to touch that.
Yes.
I don't know if children will be children. They're always going to experiment. Yes. I mean, we did, but we want to prepare them so that they understand what's poison, right? They know what heroin is. They're not going to do that, right? So we are providing some kind of education. So we just really need to be clear with them about what this is so they can identify it. Because most people, when you just look at it, you don't even know what it is.
But I think it's also vital for parents to play a role in that, because for parents to go around going, oh, my child's never going to do that, or, oh, I don't need to have that conversation with my child, or they're going to make the right decision, I just know they will. We like to think our children are always going to make the right decision in the right time with the right people. And guess what? That doesn't happen a lot of times, and we can't always be there for our children. And so it's not enough for parents just to say, well, I didn't know that they were doing that, or I didn't know how. And I think a lot of times parents can get stuck in that fear of, I didn't know how to start that conversation, or I didn't want to give my child ideas, so I didn't start the conversation of having it. It's not about giving your child ideas unless they're like way young, but like you mentioned, when they're already 12, 13, 14, they're already going to be around it. They're going to have friends talk about it. Even if you think of children who are younger, they come home saying stuff that you never even thought that you would need to have a conversation with them at this age. And you're like, whoa, what? For instance, my son came home from a sleepover saying, hey, my friend asked me if I wanted to see a gun. And I'm like, whoa, you're 7. Didn't know I need to start having this conversation of like, no, but we can't play that I just didn't know card
right.
and think that that's okay. We've got to be proactive.
Absolutely. And it's like, I said it till I was blue in the face. You can tell your children, and I did, drugs are bad. Don't do drugs. Don't smoke weed. Hurts your brain. I mean, everything till you're blue in the face.
Yeah.
But I think the difference is, I probably, in looking back in hindsight, I would have gone to a pot shop myself and I would have purchased it. But see, I wasn't educated, and that's why it's really important. And we're on this mission now with Johnny's Ambassadors. I just feel compelled, and anybody listening to this now knows and is educated, and it is your responsibility first to educate yourself, and then yes, to have that conversation with your child. And you might think it's awkward or embarrassing, but being able to say, this is a marijuana plant, right? And this is dab, this is wax, right? And this is what the difference is in the THC. It's kind of like the difference between opioids and heroin, right? This is like crack weed. Like, it's really, really important that children understand the difference. And of course, hindsight is 20/20.
Of course.
There were always things that I would have done. Fortunately, by the time they're driving, right? Because Johnny hit 16 pretty quickly, and it's really hard because now they're driving to school, they're driving to sports, they're in activities, and you can't control them, and you don't know where they are. Now, we did put a tracker on Johnny's car, so we kind of did know, because we already knew he was going down that path because someone called in a tip to his school, and so he got a tip on him, which was one of the best things that could happen, because he got suspended, got in trouble. We found out about the marijuana in the car. He was buying Adderall pills for $1. I mean, you have no idea.
Wow.
You think you know what your kids are doing. And we're talking a 4.0, 4.2 straight A model child, so it's really easy to go, not my kid.
Yeah.
He is getting great grades. He can't be dabbing. We're volunteering at church. He looks fantastic.
Right.
He's clearly not doing drugs, right? So it's really easy as a parent to tell yourself a lot of lies and excuses when in fact they're doing it right under your very nose. So,
or maybe even tell yourself as a parent that it's not as bad as it's not really that bad. And
you convince yourself. Right. But it's just based on your experience.
Yeah.
And so today's weed is not your mama's weed, right?
That's not funny, but that's funny. Yeah.
It's very different. And it's not even a plant anymore. There's nothing natural about it. It's completely chemical. And even the plant versions, the farmers have grown them to be stronger and stronger. Some of the plant versions have 20 to 30% THC now. So, and you've got to be really careful, because there's a lot of edibles that look like normal food. And sadly, the pot industry is manufacturing a lot of things that are attractive to children. Candy, lollipops. And so it's pathetic, actually. Not only is it illegal, but here they are marketing to children knowing that it damages their brain.
So how can parents really start to educate themselves? I mean, of course they can Google it, but how do they start having those conversations with their kids? And you had mentioned the age of 10. Is that really, in your experience or in your opinion, really a prime age to start having it?
Yeah.
Like, does it depend on certain factors? Because I really want parents to be proactive instead of more reactive to this. And, I'll deal with it if my child starts to do that. kind of thing.
Right. I think by the time your child is 12, they're going to be exposed to marijuana. And so it's really critical. And some of the schools provide education, and they send home a note in their 4th grade backpack, hey, we're going to be talking about drugs. So we're really going to be working on getting this curriculum. We don't need to just talk about the hard drugs, we need to talk about dabbing. And so they understand the difference. So I would check the curriculum that comes home in the backpack. But I would start, if it were me and I had to do it all over again, I would have started at 10. And if marijuana is legal for either medical or recreational purposes in your state, it's available. There are shops and you can go buy it, especially recreational. So go buy a sample, go get educated, go to the pot shop. I'm very serious. You will be shocked. You will fall over at all of the stuff that you can get. So any child under 25, I use the word child, any young adult, adolescent under 25 years old, they know what this stuff is. So it's really important that we get up to their level because they kind of like that parents are in the dark.
Right, I'm sure.
So we need to pull our heads out of the sand.
Yes.
Get educated ourselves and have early and frequent, direct, candid conversations with our children about what's available so that they are prepared. And when it does happen, and it will, that a friend has it. And then also to make sure that we are explaining to them that it isn't a coping mechanism, because teenagers are going to have bouts of anxiety and sadness and insecurity and depression. It's a normal teenage thing. When those hormones hit at 13, 14, you better be ready. Because by then they unfortunately may choose it to self-medicate and have the false belief that it helps with anxiety, when in fact the opposite is true. It's been proven to increase anxiety when you use marijuana.
So tell us how, like, whenever Johnny was going through this, what were kind of the signs that you were like, ooh, okay, this is going from not doing too much harm, that you're starting to see signs of, okay, I really need to get in front of this. This is not looking good. Not necessarily that you would have predicted that he would have died the way he did, but just that it was going down a bad path.
Well, when they actually start sneaking out, being defiant, not following the rules, getting caught. We got a phone call in the middle of the night from a police officer, and he's like, ma'am, you need to come down to such and such park. We have your son. And I'm like, who? Like, I was like, you can't possibly have my son. And he was, I don't know, maybe 16 at the time. And he snuck out at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we snuck out as kids. Right. And so you're thinking, oh, kids will be kids. Sneak out. But they're out dabbing and doing drugs and then sneaking back in and then going to school. So when there are some clear signs that are going to just smack you across the face. Sadly, even though we had the best money could buy with therapy and anxiety therapy and treatments and medication and therapists and doctors, and Johnny was in the mental hospital 3 times from, psychoses and all of that, you still feel sometimes like, I have a lot of regrets. You make the best decision you can at the time with the information you have, but you always look back. And I think parents do that anyway. I do that with my 2 living children. Gosh, maybe I should have done that a little differently. But, in this case, once they hit 18, you have no legal ability to care for them because they are 18, they're an adult. You can't talk to their doctors. You can't talk to their psychologists.
Oh, yeah.
They withdraw all their consent. And don't forget, they're seniors in high school when this happens, and they're in your home, and there is 0 you can do about it. Unfortunately, Johnny went down a very sharp path with the dabbing. It happened very quickly. He became just a totally different person abusive, mean, violent, foul language, a lot of name calling. It became a very unhealthy situation. And it's very difficult to get mental health help for marijuana. Even the insurance companies have the attitude, oh, it's just marijuana. We couldn't get him into a treatment center because he wouldn't admit to being addicted to anything other than marijuana. They were like trying to tell him, say that you're addicted to LSD. They were like wanting him to lie so that he could get into these different treatment centers.
Wow. So maybe it's about educating the healthcare system too.
Oh, don't even get.
I mean, that's like a big hurdle, but.
Oh my gosh, no, they totally failed him. He was failed by so many people in so many ways. And, you know, unfortunately, when he went to college, he had a scholarship and he wanted to go. He went to CSU in the fall of 2018. He had a roommate who moved to Colorado just to smoke weed, just to do pot. So he dabbed nonstop for 2 weeks when he started college. And he called me, fortunately, to say, I feel like killing myself. So we went and got him and disenrolled him from the university, and he was in the mental hospital, and they had him on a suicide hold because he admitted that he was thinking of killing himself. And then he told me, I'm going to just kill myself when I get out of here. So I told them that he said that. And I said, please don't let him out. He just told me that he's going to try to kill himself. And they were like, oh, we asked him. He says he's fine. I'm like, of course he says he's fine. He's a pathological liar. You know, so when he got out 3 days later, that was his first suicide attempt. We went up to CSU to get his items out of his dorm room, and he tried to hang himself in his closet here at our house. He called us and told us, I just tried to kill myself. So I called the police on the other phone while I had him on the phone, and we were driving like maniacs trying to get home. But they got him before he could get out of our driveway. And then he was hospitalized for 2 weeks. During that time, he came off of the THC. And so his brain actually healed. And so this is what's really important to understand for parents. Just because your kids have, you know, one psychotic episode, it doesn't mean they're forever going to have a mental illness, right? It's really important to catch it early. If you start seeing signs like that of paranoia, delusions, saying really bizarre things that just aren't true, like, so-and-so sent a Snapchat out to 1 million people and he was talking about me. Really? Let me see the Snapchat. And it's someone just saying, you know, so-and-so's a clown. And I'm like, he wasn't talking about you, but they start thinking that. So those are
or someone's following me, or
it's all over. He thought the mob was after him. And I'm like, how does the mob even know about you? He goes, actually, the government thinks I'm a terrorist. I mean, so there are some obviously very clear signs. But that's not everybody's going to have psychosis. Most people who use marijuana are not. And so that's what, you know, a lot of the research is trying to focus on is what makes some people the 5%, you know, have psychosis. They did a longitudinal study in Europe that concluded that half of the psychoses that they have in Amsterdam would be avoidable if the people weren't doing marijuana.
Wow.
I know.
Now that's a powerful study.
In the Lancet. Yeah, it's a very powerful study. Sadly, he recovered, went back to school, tried another university, and was fine and was sober and gravitated toward the drug culture again. So unless these teens make the connection that the dabbing is causing their brains to malfunction, if they don't make that connection and don't stay sober, that's when you see the long-term change. And that's when we started to see where it wasn't going back. His brain was not bouncing back. And even when he made a valiant effort in the last 6 weeks before he passed He had stopped smoking. He had stopped dabbing. He was reading self-help books. He went back to college again. I mean, he was really trying. And the delusion, we could read in his journals 4 days before he died that he still thought the mob was after him.
Oh, wow.
Just a waste, and so sad. And we are so compelled to teach people about this.
Yes.
So it doesn't happen to them.
It doesn't happen to them. And I think also part of it is us being able to help others identify why they're doing these drugs in the first place. Like you mentioned, are they trying to numb themselves to anxiety or emotions or feelings, or like all this kind of chemical dependency that so much of the population is dependent on? But how can we get away from that and getting more in tune with giving our kids permission to feel and to express, even if we don't necessarily agree with what they're saying, but give them that capacity to have that freedom to express themselves, but also meet them with compassion and empathy and understanding at the end of it. So they're not compelled to try these different things, but also, like you mentioned, educate them on, first of all, just staying away from it. Like, let's just do with abstinence. But if you're, educating them on the difference in these kind of things. So I want to dive for just a minute into what Johnny's Ambassadors is. And obviously you started it all because of Johnny and help educating the public, but tell us just a little bit about what that is and what we can do to help support it.
Thank you. Well, I mean, the key is talk, listen. Johnny had normal social anxiety. He had, would get panic attacks when he was going to give a presentation, so it's talking a lot about legitimate medications. He used an anti-anxiety medication that really helped him, and it would have been fine if he just would have allowed the medicine to help him instead of trying. Kids want this like instant gratification, So when Johnny passed, we were so blessed to have hundreds and hundreds of people at his memorial service. So we just started a Facebook group, and we used Johnny's college paper that he had written. It was called "The 5 Values I Think Are Most Important." And Johnny wrote about altruism, patience, conviction, enthusiasm, and gratitude. And so each of our ambassadors picked one of his values, and they committed to really putting that out into the world and reporting what those things would do to help children cope, to help society cope, community cope, families cope. And we just use that as the foundation of our curriculum, and it will be the foundation moving forward as we get it into the schools and in front of parents. So we have about 650 ambassadors now. And if you go to johnnysambassadors.org, you can go to the join button, and there's all kinds of ways to get involved. You can join the Facebook group where we post encouraging stories and helpful tips and ideas for one another. And also our newsletter list, where we'll be sending out announcements about the curriculum, what we're doing, fundraising, etc.
Awesome. I love that. And if anybody wants to donate and support that, we'll have a link in the credits after this. So as we close, give us one last piece of advice, insight, like what to look for in our kids, anywhere where we can start if we as parents don't know where to start, or maybe we don't have young kids, but we want to help others who do. Where's a great place for us to kind of get started?
Well, even if you don't have kids, you may be an uncle, you might be an aunt,
so
you have loved ones in your life who are adolescents, you're a grandparent. I mean, I think it's incumbent upon all of us, society, to understand the dangers of dabbing, this high THC marijuana product, what it is, educate early, listen, talk. Don't discount that you don't think your kids, not my kid, that it will be your kid someday, and prepare them early, and then make sure that they have other ways of coping, sports, activities, legitimate prescriptions, and be as loving and supporting as you can. And then recognize the signs if something is to happen. And johnnysambassadors.org, we've got all kinds of parental resources and research for you there as well.
Thank you so much for being here, Laura, and sharing about Johnny and Johnny's ambassadors.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. If you know someone or if you are having suicidal thoughts, there'll be a link that you can find out more to get help. And don't be afraid to talk about how you're feeling and really expressing that to people in your life. There's always someone in your life who cares, even if you don't think there is. There's always someone willing to listen, or you can reach out to a lifeline or a hotline that'll be in the credits to get more support with that. You can find out more about Johnny's Ambassadors at johnnysambassadors.org, and you can feel free to reach out and see how you can get involved and how you can donate to help educate not only other kids but other parents on the damaging effects of high THC. We'll see you next time. Have an awesome day. Bye-bye.